Thank you so much to everyone who is attending tonight. We are so happy to see you. Your commitment to this community and to this series. Now, this is our second series. We really, really appreciate it. Because I need readers, you'll all thank me for doing this. I want to begin with a huge thank you to Peach State Credit Union, the principal founding donor of the Hooper-Renwick Memorial Programming Fund and Endowment. Now, without them and the generosity of many others, this speaker series honoring those who attended Hooper-Renwick School and their achievements is possible, and it would not be possible without them. So a huge thank you for our donor sponsor. Peach State Credit Union has ensured that this speaker series will happen for a long time to come. Now, for more about tonight's speaker series and why we are so committed to this event, let me introduce a new face to Gwinnett County Public Library. This is Terry Preston. She is our manager of volunteer programs.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much, Duffy. The Hooper-Renwick Speaker Series showcases acclaimed best-selling Black authors and local champions of racial equity. One of the stated objectives of this series is to foster empathy toward among all of Gwinnett County's diverse residents. In 1951, prior to desegregation, the Hooper-Renwick School was established and served Black students in grades 1st through 12th. And it was the only Black high school in Gwinnett County. The new Hooper-Renwick Library is being built on that original site. This 25,000-foot themed library will serve the residents of Lawrenceville and Gwinnett County, preserving and telling the Hooper-Renwick story for generations to come. Thank you.
Now, the Hooper-Renwick School is now under construction, just beginning. But it's really talking to the people who were spearheaders of this project, who've been involved all the way, just two representatives tonight, that really, their stories, and I've spoken with both of them numerous times now, and I just, they're dear to my heart, and they have such a history. They are both such amazing members of our community and have accomplished such amazing things, and I'm so happy that they can join us tonight. First, I'd like to introduce one of Hooper-Renwick's outstanding graduates, Dr. John Maxey.
I can't see a thing. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for giving up your time, a little bit of your time, and come out tonight. We really appreciate it. I am John Maxey, and I just want to start out by saying I am a Gwinnettian, born and raised here in Lawrenceville, less than 1/2 mile from where we stand and sit, and attended Hooper-Renwick School, high school and elementary school, from the 1st grade all the way through the 12th grade, the only school that I attended in my elementary and high school years. So just a little bit about the school. It was an all-Black school. It was the only public school here in Gwinnett County, and people were bused from all over the county to this school. We had some amazing teachers. They taught us, they gave us the best education that they could. They really instilled in us the values of caring for people and treating people like you wanted to be treated. And even though we grew up in a segregated town, segregated period of time, that did not impact us in such a negative way that we carried forth a lot of things. But I want to leave one small story with you tonight, and that is the value of education. Hooper-Renwick School, as good as it was to us, taught me something that once I left school, joined the United States Air Force, took off around the world, it prepared me to deal with people all over the place. When I started college, 4 years removed, I found out how much of a disadvantage we had coming out of this school. And I use one example to that, and I gotta go fast. The example was I took an algebra class, but before I could take the algebra class, I had to go take remedial reading, writing, and arithmetic. Once I completed that, I started the algebra class, walked into the classroom. The instructor said, "Open your books to chapter 6, which was the quadratic equation." I put my hand up and said, "What about chapters 1 through 5? And she says, "You should have got that in high school." And I said, "Whoa, what I got in high school in my 12th grade was algebra, A plus B equals C, and that was it." Didn't understand it then and was not prepared for when I went to that first school. So the reason I bring that up is that segregation was not a good thing as it relates to education. And hopefully going forward, and I'm so glad Lawrenceville has made so many changes, that we will not repeat those kind of behaviors, and we can all come together and learn together. Anyway, that's my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Do you want to hear a little more from him? He thought that was the 5-second cue. That was the 5-minute cue. Yeah? Yeah, come on back up. When we talked, he said, "I'm going to speak for about 6 minutes." I said, "That's fine. That's close enough to 5." And then you saw the 5 and thought it was 5 seconds? No, you're good. Come on back. I'm sorry. We didn't freak you. We didn't want to freak you out. Yes. No, we want to hear more from you. Okay. She'll give you a 1. How's that?
I was trying to be obedient.
I know.
Yes. So now that I've been given more time, I can be a little bit more relaxed. A little bit about the school, the library, theme library school itself. The building, it's a 12-room originally built building, and it was going to be torn down, but fortunately we were able to convince the city of Lawrenceville at the time that we needed to keep that building as a way to show the transition from what was the old way of living to the present way of living, and then as we prepare for the future. The library itself is going to contain something that's unique, I guess, to our region, where it will have a whole lot of artifacts that were collected so that people can come in and read and see about some of the things that we were going through during those years from, I think it was 1951 through 1968 when the school was actually open. So we're hoping that when it opens late this year or early next year, that every one of you will come and partake of the history that's going to be there, but also the library itself. It is going to be a very unique library, okay? And I'm going to leave it right there.
We're not done yet. If you thought he was good, wait for this. Another exceptional graduate of Hooper-Renwick is someone I consider a friend. She is amazing as well, Joyce Moore.
Thank you, Duffy. Good evening, everyone. Glad that you came, that you're showing your interest in reading and in the Hooper-Renwick Library. John said all the little condensed things I was going to say, so now I have to make it up as I go. But again, my name is Joyce Moore. I graduated from the Hooper-Renwick High School in 1966. And as those of you are mentally very quickly trying to figure out, that was 58 years ago. And And at the time, as John said, we had no other options. We didn't realize that we were poor, that the African Americans here in Gwinnett County were, for the most part, we were poor, and that the materials that we had in our school were subpar. They were secondhand books. The school buses that we rode were secondhand school buses that the white schools had, and then once they were starting to break down, they passed them along to us at the black school. But I have to give credit to our teachers, who were all African Americans, who came from backgrounds very similar to our own backgrounds. They graduated from Fort Valley and Clark and Morehouse and Spelman and Albany State, and they poured into us all that they had. They cared about us. Since all of us in Gwinnett County, and there really weren't very many people, black or white, in Gwinnett County at that time, it was maybe 16,000 people, most of us knew each other. If you didn't know somebody, you knew somebody who knew somebody, and it was their cousin. And it was a family atmosphere, family feeling. And the teachers helped nurture that. They helped us strive to do better, to be better, to achieve more than they were able to achieve, because, again, they came from similar backgrounds as we lived in here at Gwinnett County. I'll have to say that because of some of our teachers, John and I and numerous other graduates from Hooper-Renwick were inspired to strive and do more than our parents were able to achieve. Our parents had great dreams for us, but I think our teachers inspired us to reach higher, to do better. Some of the things that they taught us were manners. Our home economics teacher, Mrs. Foster, taught us how to set a table, what forks to use, how to write a menu. And in my corporate life, and as I've moved beyond living here in Gwinnett County and the social strata here, I found those manners, the etiquette, has stood me in good stead, having dinners with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. If I hadn't had that training, I wouldn't have known which fork to use. I wouldn't have known which glass was the water glass and which was the wine glass. So even though the economics was poor, the striving for more, doing more, being better was so rich that I can't, in our 5 minutes here, I can't go through all the details. But I can say that I am proud that I graduated from Hooper-Renwick High School. And once I got to college, and you know, your freshman year, everybody, what school did you go to? And I said Hooper-Renwick, and they said, where? Hooper, Hopper, what? Never heard of either of those names before, but I am proud to say, 58 years later, that I graduated from the Hooper-Renwick High School in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and now our building is going to be a symbol of future learning, history, our past, and our present, as well as our future. So again, thank you so much for being here this evening and sharing this moment with us. Thank you.
If we could, one more round of applause for Dr. Maxey and Joyce Moore. And if you ever a chance, take them to lunch. Their stories are incredible. Sorry I kept you to 5 minutes each. I think I'm going to be punished later for that. Now, may I introduce our keynote speaker, best-selling author Victoria Christopher Murray. She is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of more than 30 novels, including The Personal Librarian and The First Ladies. Both novels Victoria co-wrote with Marie Benedict. I encourage you to read her full biography. Actually, I pared that down a little, but more of her biography in the programs we have. But I also found a few added facts. The Personal Library was a Good Morning America Book Club selection. It was also named Best Book of the Year by NPR. Al Roker Entertainment has plans to turn it into a miniseries. I know. I will add that Terry says that it is best to get The Personal Librarian as an audiobook. Is that right? Let me hear. Yes, we agree? Okay. She said it will transport you. So you should start putting that in your bio if you didn't know that. Look at me finding a new fact for you. Her other book that we're featuring tonight, The First Ladies, was Target's 2023 Book of the Year. And I will tell you, many of us in the library system have it on hold. And if you belong to the Gwinnett County Public Library system, check out the hold for both these books. We're going to be waiting a long time, but we will wait. We love the library, and we don't buy books. We borrow them. Joining Victoria in conversation is another well-known best-selling author on her own. And good news to everyone who gets to hear her tonight, she is doing her own program later with us. So please go into our events calendar and look up Miss ReShonda Tate and go to her event as well. Welcome to both of you, Victoria and ReShonda.
Hello, everyone. And all of those beautiful ladies in red. Oh, I love everyone here. I really do. I just have a special place in my heart. So, and for this lady as well.
Yes, who does not have on pink and green, but it's in my heart. Good evening. We are so excited to be here. We are here to talk about my amazing friend, colleague, the adopted aunt to my children. I know she's still trying to figure out how she got three kids.
I don't even understand that. I can write them off on my taxes. That's the kind of aunt I am.
But I am happy to be here this evening to talk about this wonderful book because I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. I am the reason you have the personal librarian.
Oh, my God.
And she's such a good friend, I have not sued her for my parts of the royalty, but she needs to slide me a little something because
This is true. This is a true story.
I drove the car while she read the proposal that she had not been reading. So let's start there with how this happened.
Yeah, so thank you. And thank you, ReShonda. ReShonda's on a tour of her own right now for her new book, which was mentioned on the Today Show, The Queen of Sugar Hill, which is about Hattie McDaniel. So she took time out of her tour to come here tonight. So I really appreciate this. So that's true. That's how the personal, she had a lot to do with it. Well, that's an exaggeration, but we write fiction. So what happened was Marie Benedict had found out about the character in The Personal Librarian decades ago. And she wanted to write this woman's story. And when Marie found out about Belle DeCosta Green, she didn't know that she was Black at the time. That's how long ago Marie first found out about Belle DeCosta Green. Well, when she decided that she was going to write this book, she realized that this was a woman who was Black, and Marie always said that while she could imagine a lot of things, she didn't want to imagine that. So she wanted to find an African-American author to write with. But publishing is kind of like the rest of this country. It was very segregated. She didn't know any Black writers. And then she read one of my novels, Stand Your Ground. And when she read Stand Your Ground, Marie reached out to me through my agent. She had no idea who I was, but maybe I'd want to write this book with her. And so my agent our agent didn't tell me what this was going to be about. my agent just sent me this 3-page single-space proposal and said, read this. Just read this. Didn't say anything. It might be a project you're interested in. And so I started reading like the first 2 paragraphs, and I never got past the first 2 paragraphs of 3 pages because it was about J.P. Morgan. And who wanted to read or write anything about J.P. Morgan? Certainly not me. And so I thought there was a mistake that had been made, so I decided to look up Marie Benedict. And I saw a picture of Marie, and I wondered if she had ever seen a picture of me. Because I was like, okay, this is the mistake. But my agent said, no, just read the proposal. So I called ReShonda, and I said, I got this proposal to write this thing. And ReShonda's like, what is Liza thinking? So I never read it. And Liza kept calling and saying, have you read it? And I'm like, oh, I'm so busy. And 1 month passed, and she called, and I said, I'm really busy. And by the 3rd month, she said to me, Victoria, no one is that busy. Read the proposal. So I tried reading it. I just couldn't read it. It was so boring. The first page was about J.P. Morgan. I never got past that. So ReShonda and I were on tour together. We can't even remember. And even ReShonda, you tried to read it.
I did. I got past the first 2 lines. And
Yeah,
I was like,
I got
"What is
further
this?"
than she did. And so we were in the car together, and we said, we're going to read this thing. Like, together, we can do anything. And seriously, we were in the car. The first page was so boring about J.P. Morgan. The second page got a little bit more interesting. It was about Belle DeCosta Green. And so it kind of, but we still were like, what is Liza thinking? On the 3rd page, last paragraph, it said, no one knew that Belle DeCosta Green was Black until she passed away. I was like, are you kidding me? We could have saved 3 months and 3 pages. All she had to do was write that, and ReShonda and I would have been on board. And
I'm driving down the freeway like, what? She was Black?
we were like almost crashing the car saying she was Black. Why didn't she start with that? So that's how it got started. And then my agent put us in touch with each other, and that's how the whole process began. But I almost blew it. I almost blew it because reading is fundamental. And so I should have read the whole thing, but it's also a little bit your fault. You didn't make me read it.
If I hadn't driven, so again, you admitted that I'm crucial to the personal librarian's success. So we're gonna tell that to the judge. All right, for those that don't know what the personal librarian is about, what is it about?
It is about, really, in just a simple form, everybody knows who, this very famous man who I really adore now, because he helped to make this whole thing happen. J.P. Morgan has probably one of the best collections in the world of rare books and rare manuscripts and art. And there was a woman who helped him build that. He did not build that himself. And the woman's name was Belle DeCosta Green. But the thing about Belle DeCosta Green is that everybody thought she was white. Until she was about 14 to 16 years old, she was a Black girl whose daddy was the first Black graduate of Harvard University. And that's who she was. And then her mother and her father had some challenges when he became the first Black professor at the University of South Carolina. And once the Civil Rights Act of 1875 was overturned, they were kind of rushed out of town by the Klan. And so her mother was afraid for her children and said, we're going to use this one thing that we have, not because we want to be white, but because we want to be equal. And she took the children and they began living and passing as white.
That's one of the things about the novel. Is throughout the novel, the tension is that Belle is trying not to be discovered.
That's right.
How does she become, first of all, an assistant to J.P. Morgan? And then tell us about that hanging over her head the whole time.
The whole time. Can you imagine being the personal librarian, building this billionaire? He was a billionaire then. He was probably the most powerful man in the world because he was more powerful than the president because he saved his country several times. But she was the person who was working closest with him. She became his personal librarian through his nephew. And she was working at Princeton University, which is why no one knew she was Black. Because Princeton, the president of Princeton at the time was Woodrow Wilson before he became president. And Woodrow Wilson wouldn't even let Black people sweep the floors. Nobody could be Black. It was the only Ivy League school that was not integrated. So she came to him on a white platter, and then she had it totally hanging over her the whole time that if she was discovered, it may not have been good. And recently, last week, they did a story on Belle on the Today Show because this is the 100th year of the anniversary. And so they had one of J.P. Morgan's like great-great-grandchildren on. And they asked him, do you think your grandfather knew? He said, absolutely not. Because if he knew, she would have been in trouble. He would have felt bamboozled.
And that was my next question. She worked so closely with him, especially people that are from a Black community. They look at a picture of Belle DeCosta Green, and they're like, she Black.
Yeah, yeah.
Where's the difference,
It
you
is
think?
so interesting. Marie and I posted the same picture of Belle DeCosta Green on our social media. And all we said was, is this woman Black or white? And so on Marie's page, everybody was like, oh, she's white. And on my page, they're like, that's my cousin Susie, she Black. That's my grandmother, she Black. I mean, there was no one. Do you remember when I posted that? There was nobody on my page. Everybody was like, oh, well, what you mean? She Black. And I think there's a couple of things that was going on at that time. Think about this, since it's in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So remember, we're looking at it with 21st century eyes. And so we have words that we didn't have before. Biracial, mixed, we didn't have all of that. And before we had Black and white, there was some terms, mulatto, but mostly it was Black and white. And so we knew at that time, our families knew what had happened on the plantations because we had in our families grandmothers who could pass and grandfathers who were as dark as midnight. And then they had children who was every rainbow in between. Every single one of us has a family like that. And so we knew about mixed and what that was. White people weren't exposed to that. So you were either Black or you were white. And then there was something else about Belle. She was an educated woman, not always by schooling, but she knew a lot. She taught herself 3 languages. She was an educated woman, so no one would expect a Black woman to be that way in 1915.
This book is a complicated look at a complicated time in our history. I'm interested in your process with Marie. You wrote this during a complicated time in our present day history. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we got the book deal, I think, in 2018, and it took us a year to write the book. We turned it in like December of 2019, and then we got our edits back in March of 2020. And I don't even know if y'all know, we got it back like 2 days before the world was shut down. And so we're like, okay, so how are we gonna write this book? That was our first draft. How are we gonna write this book now? And then we heard of this new thing called Zoom. And so we said, okay, let's kind of figure out Zoom and maybe we can do it that way. And so we started editing the book during COVID. And so we worked from 9 to 12 every day except for Sunday. And we would work on the edits of this book. And then the world exploded. Well, this country exploded with this issue of race. And when George Floyd was murdered, I was able to explain to Marie why Belle's mother wanted them to pass. Because till that point, Marie didn't get it. Marie was saying, why would she give up such a rich, wonderful history? She had generations of free family. Her family hadn't been enslaved for generations. They were all educated, the men and the women. And so Marie didn't understand, why would someone walk away from all of that? And I told her, just look at what happened. She did not want her children to end up on the wrong side of a cop's knee. And she knew that. And ReShonda, it was so amazing, because I was thinking, if Genevieve had come back at that time, she would have said, see? Because one of the things that I had wanted to do with the personal librarian was to change Black people's view of passing. Because let's admit it, we don't like it. And we would talk about people, and we're thinking that people just want to be white, and that's not what it's about all the time. That's not what it was about in this case. She was just trying, for a woman who had an encounter with the KKK, she was trying to save her children. And so it was a really interesting time, because not only were we writing this book as race was exploding around us with the personal in this country, but I got to be a Black woman who talked every day for 3 hours with a white woman about race. And we did that from March until we turned in the book at the end of August. And there's no way you cannot be changed if you are sitting with someone from another race and every day having honest conversations. Because I wasn't having that conversations with my Black girlfriends. If I call you up and tell you something happened to me, you like, girl, that happened to me last Thursday. So, with my Black friends, we don't share that. And then with my white friends, I don't want to waste our time together talking about that. But here, this was our job. And it just brought us closer and closer and closer together, because when you can talk to another person of another race about that, you can talk to them about anything. And that's why she is not only like a sister to me now, but she's like a sister to you.
She is. You talk about what you helped her see. What did she help you see?
So this is one of the biggest things that she helped me see about race is, I used to wonder, why did people think racism was over? Why? I was like, why? And one of the things I got to see with working with Marie was Black people see racism every day in the little tiny things, where a person says to me, oh, your bag can't go here because that's just for the first class passengers. As if I can't read, and if I could not sit in first class. Or when they say, oh no, this is just for, in the airport, this is just for the premier people. As if I can't read, as if I'm not premier. So we have these little microaggressions every day. Where I live, and people walk up to me and, in the building and say, can you get a package for me? And I was like, just like if you could get my package for me. But yeah, I'll get yours, you get mine, and we'll be cool. And so those kinds of things, and you know how they just bug us and bug us and bug us, but it's every day. And so for someone like Maria, for most white people see racism in big events. So they saw the Selma March on TV, and they were like, oh, no, we're not doing this. We're putting together a Voting Rights Act. They saw George Floyd, they were like, oh, no. So it has to be a big event, because microaggressions are not seen. They're felt. They're felt by us every day, just chipping away. And so nobody can feel what we feel. And because of that, I have said that I will never stop explaining. Because I know that sometimes we've had conversations with some of our friends where people say, I'm tired of explaining this. I will never be tired to explain to people something there's no way for them to feel. No way.
And is that one of your takeaways that you do now? I know you and Marie do a lot of talks all over the country. You want to do more than just write a book. You want people to open their eyes on both sides. Right?
It's so interesting, because when we were writing The Personal Librarian, we thought we were just introducing the country to this wonderful woman who needed to be told, known. And so we wrote this book and didn't have really any plans on if we were going to do something else together. But then we started touring together, And people love the story of Belle de Costa Green, but then they read our author's notes in the personal librarian, and then they heard Maria and I speak to each other and talk like this. And people would come up to us as we were signing books and say, I want one of you, or I want one of you, because they said they wish they could have somebody to have these kinds of discussions with. And the best thing that happened to us, and Marie would tell you this too, we were at a signing in Washington, D.C., and at the end, a white man, maybe in his 60s, had purchased 2 books. And he came up and he said, sign one to me and just put your signature in the other, because I'm going to find a black man to read this with. And he said, and I'm really scared, but if you 2 did it, I'm going to do it. And that changed and then Marie and I from that point said, these are no longer books. We're on a mission. If we could get people to just start talking and seeing, I think we could change some things one book at a time.
All right. Wonderful. Yes. So I want to shift a little bit now to another book, The First Ladies, that also changed for a lot of people. And The First Ladies is about Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt. Where did this story come from?
So this is a perfect segue, ReShonda, because this story came from the personal librarian. Because when we started touring and people were saying, I want what you and Marie have, people said they could see our friendship. They know it's like we're sisters now, and they really wanted that. People want to have conversations, but they're scared. There's 2 things happening. People want to have a conversation, but they're scared because they don't want to offend anyone. And then on the other side, people are like, I'm so tired of explaining. And so we knew that there's a bridge to bring people together, because if you can have the kind of conversations that Marie and I have all the time, then you're never going to get tired of explaining, and you're never going to be too afraid to ask. And so what happened was we knew we wanted to write a book that would be the beginning of this thing that we call our mission. And so it was Marie who can, you tell the people, she can find some stories, can't she?
Right.
Marie can find some stories. She found the story of Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune, who were best friends during a time of segregation and Jim Crow. Yet not only did they find a way to become best friends, but they found a way to change some things in this country. And desegregation happened because the 2 of them forced FDR to do an executive order. And he desegregated the military, which became the foundation for desegregation in the entire country. And that happened because of Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune. And I think that's only one of the amazing things they did. But this book allows people to see a friendship with a black woman and a white woman. It could easily be a black man and a white man who make mistakes with each other. And that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to get it wrong. Because if you really love each other, you'll find a way to work it out.
Why do you think so many people know about Eleanor Roosevelt? They knew about her history and her contributions, and you're meeting people that are like Mary who?
Yeah, that was a little sad. When we were touring with the personal librarian and people like, what is your next book? And we would say, it's about Eleanor Roosevelt, yay, yay, and Mary McLeod Bethune. And I'm the only one saying, yay. But that's changing. She was such a force. She was a celebrity in her time. She was a woman who was an educator. The reason they became friends because they had the same goals. They were the same person in different skin and different backgrounds, but their hearts were the same. And people just didn't know. There was no time to teach in school. I don't know. But that's why historical fiction is important. And that's why I'm so appreciative to all of you, because historical fiction educates. We not only entertain, but we educate. And then people get a chance to tell their friends, you need to read this book. Who knew? And so that's how that book came about. It came about because we knew we wanted to show people how you could have this kind of friendship.
One of the things that intrigued me about Eleanor Roosevelt in this book was how she used her position, her privilege to further her cause, to take small acts and make them a big deal. Talk a little bit about that.
You know, I adore Eleanor Roosevelt, even though she was an AKA. But I adore...
Naturally.
But Mary McLeod Bethune was a Delta. Kind of like best friends who are Deltas and AKA. But one of the things I adore about Mary McLeod Bethune, but Eleanor Roosevelt is she got nothing out of fighting for equality for Black people. There was nothing she was going to gain. It was just the heart that God had given to her. That was it, nothing else. And she used her privilege in every way she knew how. Like the restaurants, you know, Black people couldn't go into most restaurants in Washington, D.C. We don't think about that as the South. It's the South. And she would use her privilege, call up a restaurant and say, I'm the first lady, I'm coming to your restaurant. And so you know they went crazy, right? The first lady coming to our restaurant, this is gonna be good. They would choose the best table in front of the window and everything. And then she'd walk in with her best friend. And they would decide at that moment, this is how bad racism and discrimination is. They had the First Lady of the United States who walked in with her Black best friend, and they said, your table's in the back, to the First Lady of the United States. And she reminded them who she was. She was like, oh no, I'm the First Lady of the United States. That table you had right there in the window, that's gonna be just fine. And they would eat in the window, and Eleanor Roosevelt was the only First Lady to have an all-female press corps that followed her. The only one then, the only one till now. And so she would call up the women and say, I'm having lunch with Mary. Come over there and take some pictures for the newspaper. And so she would do things like that constantly. The very first time Black and a white person shook hands in public was Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune, because Black people and white people were not allowed to touch in public. And they planned it. And Eleanor said, without gloves, it's going to be skin to skin. And they did. She just had she wanted to normalize equality. And she was going to do it no matter what.
Okay. Well, we could go on and on, but I want the audience a chance. I don't know if we're doing questions, but before we move, I do want to ask, what are you working on now?
Okay, so she know I can't really talk about it yet.
She knows that.
But I can tell you this. I told ReShonda about it. I'm not supposed to tell ReShonda, but I'm never supposed to tell ReShonda, but they're like, Victoria, don't tell nobody except for ReShonda, because they know what I'm doing. And so I told ReShonda about it this weekend in Oklahoma. We were in Oklahoma. And ReShonda was sitting at the table across from me. And this is how, good friends can be honest with you. She said, I'm just kind of wondering what would happen if you were to keel over right now and you couldn't write the book and then I just stepped in.
It's a good idea.
I'm like, so you really saying that to me? And so she had
Plan B. I'm just having a backup plan, that's all.
But then I don't know how you had continued the story that something would happen to Marie too.
Because you're writing it together, so you both.
And so then I texted Marie and I said, so we just need to watch out because ReShonda's thinking, how could she take, if something happened to both of us, she could write the book. So ReShonda has a good eye and ear, because she told me that about Lust. When I wrote Lust, she told me it was going to be made into movies.
I said that from the very beginning, and let the record reflect, I tried to buy it from her.
I didn't want to sell it for $2.
That's beside the point. I did make her an offer.
For $2.
That's all I had. Okay, you can't talk about that one, but you do have one that is coming up.
I have a new book coming out. Can you believe it? I'm doing my first solo historical fiction. It is called, and ReShonda doesn't even know that because I got the email while I was sitting over here. It is definitely being called Harlem Rhapsody. And it's about which is a title that ReShonda came up for me. She came up.
See, the judge needs to know this stuff.
Where were we? We were at your house in Houston, yeah. And so we were coming up with lots of titles, so we did it together. But ReShonda came up with this. And it is about the Harlem Renaissance. And there is one woman who discovered every single Harlem Renaissance writer. She met Countee Cullen when he was 16, Langston Hughes when he was 17. She was best friends with Nella Larson. She was a mentor to Zora Neale Hurston. And she was a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I'm just saying.
All the women in history, how she keep finding the deltas.
So this is funny because my publisher keeps saying, Victoria, everybody can't be a Delta. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't understand. But so the truth is, ReShonda, I didn't know she was a Delta, right? I didn't know. Nobody believes me, but I really didn't know she was a Delta.
And when she found out,
oh my
Lord.
She's a member of Delta, and Deltas didn't know for a long time about her, but this woman changed literature. She probably published Langston's first 20 poems. All the poems she was his publisher. He said she was his muse, that she was the midwife of the Harlem Renaissance. She birthed so many people. So that's coming out February 2025. So I hope I can come back and talk about that one.
You left off a little sidebar about who she had an entanglement with.
Yeah, so there's some entanglements going on in this book with her and W.E.B. Du Bois. Yeah, she was the love of his life. I really believe
Not
that.
his wife, right?
Well, okay, so...
I'm just asking.
So you were with me when we discovered this. We were in California looking up information for your book, and we discovered her entanglement with, and we saw some of the letters, and ReShonda and I sitting in Starbucks going, oh my God. Like, I can't write that. But you'll have to read the book. You'll have to read the book. So before we go into questions 2, I would like to turn the tables for a moment. Because we were in California researching books, we do a lot of work together, in case you guys didn't know. This is a dear, dear, dear sister friend of mine. So can you tell us a little bit about why you're on tour now?
So Hattie McDaniel, the first Black person to win an Academy Award for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, I wrote a book about her called The Queen of Sugar Hill because I was fascinated with all we do not know about her. And just as a sidebar, anything you're reading on the internet, the majority of it is wrong. And so we discovered that her life is fascinating, and I'll be on March 14th talking about that book. I'm so excited about it.
I do want you to tell just a little bit more how you did not like Hattie, but your grandmother taught you a lesson.
Yeah, so I didn't like Hattie because when I first saw her in Gone with the Wind, my grandmother loved the movie. And my grandmother said, why don't you like her? And I said, well, she's a maid, and she's a demeaning stereotype. And my grandmother said, but she's playing a maid, and I am a maid. So why are you looking at her with such disdain? And besides, it's 1939. What did you expect her to play, Scarlett O'Hara? And it was at that point that I took off my 21st century lens and started looking at her in a different light.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating because people were looking down on her like that. So we'll talk about that later. So let's open it up for questions. Can we? Okay, so we can't see anything. Like I was pretending when I was looking out here. We can't see nobody.
I'm right here. I'm right here. We're going to go ahead and try to do some questions. So I'm going to just be the roving reporter. Okay, we have go underneath the cameras. I don't know how you guys are going to cover this in the video. We'll figure out something. Here's the microphone.
Love your book. I just finished First Ladies last week. But what are your feelings on the attack on African American history in this country right now and what they're doing to squash we didn't learn a lot in my day anyway, and now they're trying to make it even worse than it is. So I just would be curious on your thoughts on what they're doing to squash
Yeah, what
African
they're
American
doing.
history.
I think, thank God that God moved our hearts to start writing these books now. Because the more they try to squash it, the more we're going to keep telling the history. And I'm not going back to contemporary fiction. This will be what I'm writing now, and probably ReShonda as well, because there are so many hidden figures, so many things we were never told and taught. And so the more they try to squash us, the more we're going to keep writing these books. And you know, it's so interesting because one of my favorite markets to go to, believe it or not, is Florida. Because when I go to Florida, ask ReShonda, like 400 people turn out to see in Florida. And one time I was there, and there was like 500 people in the audience, and the first person to ask a question was a man, a white man. He stands up, and he says, so what do we need to do to make sure these books don't get banned? And then, like, men have a mob mentality, because then all the white men, and they go like, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, okay, let me explain. I just want to go home. I don't live in Florida. I just want to get on the plane so y'all have to fight. But they were the people who live in Florida are saying, what do I need to make sure the first ladies, this man had read the first ladies, and he's like, I need you to do something to make sure your book's not banned. And then all his friends stand up in the audience, and I'm like, okay, guys, you know that. But we have a lot of people on our side. They may have louder voices, but we got a lot of people on our side. And so all we can do is keep writing them, and then if you support us, we're good. Thank you.
Another question? Raise your hand so I can see you.
Okay, so see, this is our favorite part now. Our favorite part of questions. So if you don't start raising your hands, we're going to start calling on you.
You in the red. Question from you in the red.
You in the red.
Anyone else?
Okay, here's a question.
Okay,
Deirdre,
give me a minute.
we have been
Wearing
friends
heels.
for how many years since Temptation, right?
Yes, since Temptation. I think I was pregnant with my daughter.
Oh my goodness, and I just asked
And
you,
that
how was your
was-
grown daughter?
Yeah, my daughter's 20, but I was pregnant with her the first time I met Victoria. And you mentioned that you don't understand why there's a lot of people that show up in Florida when you come. You know, there's a rich history in Florida. And as I was listening to the two graduates speak, my dad he's from Gainesville, and he went to, it was called Lincoln High School, all black high school. And he's very, very proud of, going to that high school, the history, the rich history that they have there in Florida. And so when you were just mentioning it, that I just thought about that. And even when the graduates were speaking, about 5 months ago, my dad is 82. My sister and I, we drove my dad to Gainesville, Florida. We drove him back to his high school. He took pictures on his high school. He loves education. He loved African American. He still to this day loves African American history. And he had a rich, rich history at Lincoln High School. So he loves everything, everything African American. I think it's just the proud, just being proud because he grew up in that era when, yes.
I think you may be right because, and I'm not saying other states don't have it.
Right, right.
But what's so interesting about Florida is that whether you're black or white, you're proud of
Exactly.
the history.
Yes.
And you don't want to lose the history. And I say that because Mary McLeod Bethune is the only black person to have a statue in Statuary Hall in
Yes.
the Capitol, and the governor is the one who decides who goes in there, and the governor of Florida replaced a Confederate soldier with
Exactly.
Mary McLeod Bethune. So you're like, what? But that was because of the people who
Yes.
pushed him to do that. And it wasn't black people.
Exactly.
It was the people who pushed him to do that because they were proud of her and proud of her history there. So yeah, one of the things that I find most hopeful as I go around the country and tour, one of the things that I'm most hopeful about is that you could watch the news and feel, oh, like, are we going to survive this? And there's just so many wonderful people. And there's more of this. There's more people who want to work this out together than the other voices that may sound louder, but they're not greater in number.
Well put. And on that note, I'm going to take one more question. If anyone has one. All right, right back here.
Lady in red.
Lady in red. We called on you. Your answer.
I just want to say, Victoria, you're my favorite author. I know you've written over 30 books, and I counted before I left, I have 19 of them. And I really enjoy you. And I just want to ask, out of all the books that you've written, what's your favorite?
That's a good question. So books are really like children. Like, you really shouldn't say you have a favorite. Like, my parents, I know I was their favorite. Like, I know that for a fact, but there's no way they could tell my sisters that because then they'd need therapy for Thanksgiving dinner. But I know it's a fact that I say. So you really shouldn't say, but I do have some. Stand Your Ground is probably my favorite novel that I've written, along with The Personal Librarian, but for different reasons. Stand Your Ground was a book I wrote in 2015 it was pretty, quote unquote, new then, about an unarmed young black man being murdered by a white man. But I wrote it from a different perspective. I wrote it from the black mother and the white wife of the shooter my readers thanked me for her perspective because they said they'd never thought about all the lives that were destroyed. They only saw one. And one of the reasons that was one of my favorite books is when I wrote the scene of the two mothers, the white woman and the black woman, meeting in the bathroom in the courthouse and what happens between them. So I guess I was trying to write these kinds of books before I started writing these kinds of books. And it was when Marie read Stand Your Ground that she reached out to me to start writing these books.
And that is also the book she won the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literature.
Yeah, I won that year. ReShonda and I were both nominated. That year, ReShonda and I won every award together for her book, Mama's Boy. So that was a fun year for us. But we went to the NAACP dinner together and had fun. And when they called my name, I didn't expect, because I was like the Susan Lucci of I kept getting nominated and I never won. And so she did. She said to me, they called your name. Because I was just getting nominated. But that book, Stand Your Ground, led me to writing these kinds of books now. So probably Stand Your Ground and The Personal Librarian, which opened this door. But you're not supposed to say you have favorites.
We have one final question, and I'm going to give it to him because he didn't use his whole 5 minutes.
I'm not so sure if this is a question. It is a question in the form of a question, but it's about the forgotten people. And I'm thinking about those of us who were able to graduate from school or college, okay, during this time of segregation. But there were a lot of folks who, because of segregation and because they were moved away from the school that they may have been attending, and I'll speak specifically about Hooper-Renwick, they had to go to another school. And what they found is that they were not welcomed, just to put it mildly, but they didn't graduate. And they were very bitter. And I know some of those folks, okay? And I'm just wondering if there were, in the future, something to think about, in terms of writing about those types of situations.
Yeah, we'll write about anybody that we think has a story that needs to be told. I mean, there's nothing, would you say the same?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what it's going to take, is someone to continue to tell their story so they don't get lost.
Thank you so much to both of you. This was such an entertaining evening. My stomach hurts from laughing so hard. You are just, I think everyone wants to be your friends as well. So I hope you don't mind all those friends requests you're going to get. Thank you so much. Such a great night. Another round of applause for ReShonda.
Thank you.
Another round of applause for Victoria. You each get your own round of applause. And finally, thank you to all of you who came to tonight's event. We are so happy that you're here. We want to continue having these conversations. You don't realize how perfect your comments were and are, because this is why the Hooper-Renwick Speaker Series was developed. Let's have the conversations. Let's talk about it. We are one community, and this community is ever growing, ever changing, becoming more diverse than ever. And we need to talk about it. We're all going forward together. We're all in this together. Like it or not, we're all in this together. If you enjoyed tonight's speaker series, we invite you to give to this endowment fund. It will be used for more of these conversations. That new Hooper-Renwick Library, themed library, has a big space in it on purpose so we can have these conversations in the community. Again, thank you so much for attending.
Are we signing books?
Yeah, I was just going to say, thank you so much for attending. Once we go outside, give us a few minutes to set up. They will be signing books. Well, actually, you will be signing books. And remember, ReShonda's going to be back at our library system, so please come back and join us for her event as well. Thank you so much, and thank you to our sponsor, Peach State Credit Union. Good night.